All right. So this is the process of me creating a Rosetta Seed panel. This is a full panel. There's going to be a total of 8 on here. This particular panel I'm choosing because it's got a white contrast. As you can see, it's a white marble look. This is a porcelain. This is a porcelain tile, and and then it's got this print on it. They say it's antimicrobial or something. It's for a shower tile. The important thing here is that it's a white contrast, and that it's porcelain. I don't know if you can tell by the sound, but anyway. So my goal on here is just to create enough space for 8 of these seeds to be engraved and then marked. I don't necessarily have to mark the ones on this white tile. I did one earlier. If you look at my earlier videos on this, I did one where I'm showing basically the whole process. Well, not the whole process, but me laser engraving a marked and an unmarked tile, so of this color. And the mark did pop a little better. It was a good, it did look a little better in my opinion. But overall, in person, if you're looking at them, I've heard feedback that just the engraving is fine too, without the mark, and some like it better not being marked. So I will have some marked. What I mean by marked, let me be clear. So engraving, when I say engraving, I mean the laser is going to literally cut into this porcelain. It's going to cut through this white, and it reveals this kind of an orangey, coppery, brownish color. And the contrast isn't bad because you've got the white, right? It does become a little bit of a problem when you have finer or smaller font sizes for the text. And some of the seeds, some of the individual sections have smaller print. Now I've enlarged some of these texts just for that purpose, because it's just been too small to really see well. But that's also where the marking came in. By marking it, now when I say marking, what I do is I engrave it, so that puts that nice deep etch into it. And that etch is that engraving, I guess let's define it this way. Mark would be surface level mark. Now, it's not like this pencil. So think of it like this. So this pencil would be the lightest of marks, right? If you want to go a little bit deeper mark, maybe you do it with ink, right? Or a or like a Sharpie type of a pen. If you want to go a little bit deeper, now, if you put some titanium dioxide on this, paint some on here, and then run the laser at a certain frequency and speed and power setting, it will mark this tile. So it'll look darker. It'll look like a black ink mark almost, or a black marker, or black paint, if you will. And but it will. So this is a lighter version of it. You saw this one was really light. I've now got it where it's really black. But and it won't come off. Like this will come off. I take a little bit of water rub, but obviously this pencil mark will come off. But the titanium dioxide, once I run a laser over it appropriately, it ain't coming off. Now will that last? I mean, it'll probably last hundreds of years. I mean, theoretically, if you kept it in pristine condition, I guess it would last indefinitely. But but the idea of a Rosetta seed is that we want to, entropy proof them, right? We want these things to last very, very long time. You pass these down through your family, through generations would be the idea, right? And by doing that, the idea is that by doing that, you are it's aesthetically it's a beautiful thing, but B, that's how you're creating that civilization insurance. Because if something happens, we want the purpose of this is so that those who are, as they say, left behind, there's another religious term to it, the remnant that's left, post-apocalypse, they have the ability to rebuild much faster than we do. Not only that, so these particular ones, and I'll go in depth later on when I start actually putting on this. So this one's going to have images on it, and I'll have a few words describing each image. But the idea is that you can restart civilization, based on these images, fairly quickly. And what I mean by civilization, versus being a purely agrarian society where 90% of the population is 99% of the population, they spend all their day out in a field somewhere planting seeds and harvesting crops. And that is a great thing to do. There's no doubt about that. But, even farmers get sick. Even farmers want to know, and their kids want to know, what are the stars made of, right? So what does that mean? That means some of the farmers' kids are going to grow up and they're going to want to go and study astronomy, right? They want to study, and will they have tools? Will they have any kind of history already to build upon? There's an old saying, building upon the knowledge of giants, standing on the shoulder of giants. I've read books with that quote in it. I think Stephen Hawking was pretty famous about that quote, and but that's the idea, But what happens if all the work that those giants did, right? Michael Faraday, Isaac Newton, right? Aristotle. What if, that knowledge is lost, right? And not just those guys. I mean, those are principal, necessary, founding things for civilization, what they taught. But what about washing your hands before surgery? To me, a civilization is being able to, you're a farmer, something happens, you get, something's broken, maybe there's a compound fracture of some type, whatever, really bad thing happens, but, everybody's farmers and nobody knows anything about anatomy or, no one understands germ theory, right? All that was lost, right? All the doctors, in modern times, most of them, right? They all spent their time studying medicine, and which is great. But when certain horrible things happened, they had no idea how to start a fire, right? Purify water. Some of them do. I'm sure there's plenty that do. But in general, the point is, if that knowledge is lost, right? And you're a farmer with a compound fracture, your kid's in a compound fracture, And, you know, maybe some of y'all know a little bit about how to take care of animals. It's a farm. Don't know about germ theory. So what happens? I'll tell you what happens. You end up passing whatever germs you had from you know, you just got through, you know, not to be too graphic here, but you just got through, you know, milking the cows and cleaning out the stalls or whatever it is you did, tilling the field, right? Pulling up weeds, and now you got all these germs from the earth, from the ground, from all these places. And what happens? You know, what's the situation then? Well, I'll tell you the situation is you're spreading germs from your hands into a wound, right? We know this now. That's basic germ theory. Well, they wouldn't know it. They wouldn't know it unless you, and your kindness and wisdom, maybe left a Rosetta Seed about germ theory. You know, maybe you bought one and either you kept it for yourself or you encouraged your, you know, local university or your local church, whoever, and they bought a little library of these, which would be about three of these panels, right? Because you would have the images, we'd have one more medically based and historical based, and then one more technologically based, right? So let's say a basic library would be 3 of these panels. And they kept them up. Well, guess what? Your community knows about germ theory. All you simply have to do, and you know how to make a soap bar, by the way. That's another one of these seeds. How to make soap seems pretty important. But you know to wash your hands before, you know, touching an instrument or touching an open wound in a child or, you know, somebody. You know, this might sound silly to some people, but go back and just do a quick Google search. Hit pause and do a quick Google search on how long ago they've realized that you need to wash your hands before surgery. Go do that and come right back, because I'll you know, spoiler here, you know, it wasn't long ago. You know, we're talking, you know, less than 100, 200 years that that this was discovered to be, you know, a fact. So that not washing your hands spreads disease. What about during childbirth, right? Did you wash your hands? Sounds like basic common sense right now, but, you know, it's not common sense, right? It took thousands of years for mankind to wash their hands before, you know, doing anything. Now, granted, if you read the Bible in the Old Testament, there's a lot of wonderful and important, you know, messages about cleanliness and all that. And now we know why, right? You know, those people were inspired by God, by the universe, however you describe the energy and wisdom of a conscious, you know, universe or being that's, you know, even above and beyond the universe. You know, that knowledge was given to ancient Hebrews, and there's been knowledge throughout the world, but very rarely was that knowledge detailed. And the Bible has some very detailed rules. Unfortunately, they made it, you know, into a religion. They made it a religious thing rather than a common sense thing. Like, let's wash our hands before we do X, Y, and Z. And so, you know, as people do, I'll tell you, that's another thing. I don't want these Rosetta Seeds to turn into some kind of, you know, religious thing years from now. That's why some of these Rosetta Seeds are, you know, philosophical. There's Jesus' greatest teachings about the golden rule, right? So that's not my greatest teachings. It's, you know, Jesus. There's logic and critical thinking that came from what Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. so these ideas are also part of the library, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to think for yourself and know how to, reason what works and what doesn't work. And if you're just sitting around and somebody says, this deity or that deity told me that, blowing smoke at a wound will heal it, but, there's no test for that, or no one even understands the scientific method. That's a seed as well, basic scientific method, basic logic and critical thinking. Well, I guarantee you, people will for hundreds of years blow smoke or bleed, right? Remember that? They were bleeding people. And what did that do? There are only very rare circumstances where actually bleeding a person would be medically called for, right? And I can't even think of them off the top of my head, but that was a common practice, right? For just about everything. So those are the worst case scenarios for a Rosetta seed. The best case scenario for a Rosetta seed is just a reminder, right? The best case scenario for Rosetta seed is the reminder. Reminder what? Look at what we created, and look what can be lost. When I say we, mankind, our greatest minds came up with the laws of motion, right? And it wasn't easy, and it really only matured. That really only matured very recently, right? So it's important knowledge. That's extremely important knowledge to have about the laws of motions. With the laws of motion, you're able to do incredible things, right? And not just the laws of motion. What about, once people started creating machines using Newton's laws, right? All of a sudden they ran into what? Entropy, right? And then soon thereafter, because they figured out how basic entropy works, we ended up creating things like air conditioning, right? and we all know this. You are not in a civilized society if you don't have air conditioning. And that's a joke. Of course, there's plenty of civilized society without air conditioning. But what a great invention, right? Was to have air conditioning. So what happens when you have air conditioning? Well, people can work inside longer hours, which is a good or bad thing. I also think that, we will soon create greater, more efficient air conditioning systems, right? Right. I'm very impressed, on multiple levels with, say, the Tesla cars have a heat pump, from what I understand, that is a very efficient machine, right? And so if we can create even more efficient heat pump systems, then eventually we'll be able to really control temperature and things like that. And I hope one day to create a Rosetta seed about that. So that's why I'm really passionate about the idea of a Rosetta seed, And on these particular, I'm going to have different images. I'm going to have a rocket on a launch pad, a cityscape where skyscrapers are being built, a shipyard where humongous ships are being unloaded off a dock, right? And so on and so forth. I'm going to have different ones. Why? Because imagine if we had, an image, a silhouetted, engraved image, right? and then, I'll have my mark on it. So we know, so let's say hundreds or thousands of years from now, they're looking back on our time, and they see the remnants, the footprints, the leftovers, if anything is left, of these humongous buildings, right? At the very least, their foundations and footings, right? And they would know that monumental objects sat on these things, right? Because of just how deep and how fortified the foundations are, even if nothing else is left but the foundations. Well, here's an image engraved in porcelain of a skyscraper with a crane next to it. Now imagine if we found, you think of all of Egypt, right? With all their amazing inscriptions and engravings and everything that's going on in Egypt, do we see, an image of a pyramid, right? There, okay, so, we see this pyramid, right? And on the pyramid, there's a crane, right? And here's an image of, so them with, blocks, and they're building the pyramid, right? And we would go, okay, now we know. Now we know how they built the pyramid. They created these huge cranes. We may not know what the cranes were made out of because, you would have to have some high-grade steel and all that stuff. And this is, Stone Age work. But anyway, the point is, there's not an image anywhere that I know of, I don't think anybody else can produce one, of them building a pyramid. So what if we have images of some of the most important things that we use in our society now, and how they were built, monumentally, so monuments, but maybe even some machines, And you can, if you etch these things in metal, well, metal will rust, metal will deteriorate over time very quickly, believe it or not. Metal's not a good long-term solution. Obviously, paper is good, but paper has to be in a, we do have papyrus and stuff like that from, 2,000 years old now. The, the Nag Hammadi, I think I'm probably saying that wrong, but that we found some texts in ancient Rome describe, that have books of the Bible and books that were banned from the Bible, right? Like the Gospel of Thomas and so forth. We have those that survived, but those survived under very, they were in a cave in an arid area, that was undisturbed for thousands of years, right? Okay. But most all the other, maybe there was an image somewhere of the pyramids being built and they put it on a piece of papyrus and it burned up in Alexandria or something, right? That's why these seed panels are so important. They're on a porcelain. Porcelain will outlast just about everything, if you can keep them intact, right? And this is why I need universities. This is why I need, people who can put these in safe places, right? And also they're in, and then the idea is that they're spread out. There's not just a whole bunch of them in one spot, but they're in Georgia, they're in New York, they're in California, they're in Texas, they're in Florida, they're in South America, they're in Europe, they're in Asia, they're in Africa, right? They're in Australia, New Zealand, they're in, there's libraries spread throughout the world of these 3 or 4 panels, and that will most definitely, boost. Right now, to get to a point where you understand the basic laws of motion took thousands of years. Our recorded history, goes back only a few thousand years that we know of, right? There's some stone inscriptions that we can't decipher quite yet that are even older than that, but none of those inscriptions tell us how they did things. There might be some vague things. They're oriented toward a certain star cluster, right? but they're not telling us. You might find some vague things about some props they did. Most of the stuff they left behind are accounting, like how much money they spent, right, on this or that, or goods or services that were exchanged. But you don't get like their greatest technologies, or you don't get how they started it. It took 2,000 years since the Roman Empire for this, very strange fellow, let's put it that way, named Isaac Newton to come up with the laws of motion. And this strange genius, he's like one of the greatest minds that ever existed. Well, I can tell you right now, if we have the laws of motion, right, the basic laws of physics inscribed in here, and you get a great mind. Let's say they're not a super mind, right? It's not a Tony Stark. But let's say, it's a smart person, right? Let's say you got a smart person. There's lots of smart people, right? People with an IQ over, 120, right? There's plenty of them. You don't have to be, 200 IQ person, right? And you could take these ideas, which would be found throughout the world, theoretically, and you could start creating a small electric machine that can power a light, right? Right? You can share with your local healer, hey, there's these really tiny things that are smaller than you can see, right? They're so small, but they're little bugs. They're like little bugs, right? And these are called germs. And you put those in the wrong place and under the right circumstances, like not washing your hands while you're doing surgery. And they will make you really sick, and actually you can die from that. We call that infection, right? So a really smart person can take these ideas and explode and share them, explode them, industrialize them, spread them. So that's the idea of the Rosetta Stone. This is a basic way I set this up. Really what I'm trying to do is get these first four set up and oriented. The seeds are all approximately 145 millimeters by 145 millimeters. So some of them are slightly larger, slightly smaller. But if the idea is to get these first four in the right orientation, and then I can do these two outer ones relative to that, and it'll fit on here nicely. So again, right now you can get these on Etsy.com. Just go to Etsy.com, put in Rosetta Seeds, right? As a matter of fact, I think as of now, if you Google Rosetta Seeds and tile, so just add that in the search, Rosetta Seed and tile, it'll bring you somewhere. You'll see an image of a tile being made, or a video, or a comment, or something like that. But right now you can get them on Etsy.com. And if you are a university, or you're someone with means and would really like to support, I'm also on Patreon, and I'll get those links out as soon as I can. But I think they're out on my X account. Tag Engravings, that's another way to look me up, Tag Engravings. But if you go on my X account under Tag Engravings, or on YouTube, Tag Engravings, or on Etsy, send me a message. If you're, again, a university, college person of means, and you would like to invest and help create civilization insurance, help spread knowledge and awareness to the generations that just got everything right. I grew up with nothing. These generations, they grew up, I'm literally giving my kids tablets and stuff, and knowledge is free. It's nothing to this generation, right? Well, these are also ways to remind people, literally etched into it, hey, this stuff came under hard work. It took a lot to get here. A lot of people suffered, up until the point in which we learned how to, do some basic things like plumbing, right? Plumbing was lost for 1,000 years or more after the Roman Empire collapsed. So, very big deal here. And I hope you guys will invest. I hope you will support in whatever way you can. At the very least, buy an individual seed. I do have some tiles that are just artwork on tiles. They're not necessarily seeds, but even buying those would help support me making more of these. The more of these I can make, the cheaper I can make, individual seeds. So that, even the average person, literally, if you take this, wrapped it in something to help prolong it a little bit. If you literally just buried this in your backyard, you would be doing the world a favor, right? But these are works of art. When they're done, look at my other videos. They're beautiful, and they're interesting. They're conversation pieces. They also come with a stand so that they can be propped up, and you can display them. You can put them on a shelf. You can put them, on a countertop. You can put them, in your fireplace or whatever. I've got a half panel on my fireplace. It's beautiful. Looks really interesting. And there's different kinds. There's these on the white. I've got them with a black, and then it's etched into it, so it pops that way. So talk to me. Let me know what you think. Also, if you have ideas for Rosetta Seeds, what are your ideas? What are some of the most important? Remember, we got to put these as a seed so that a smart person could take the basic information and start the process of rekindling it. I can't sit here and write all of, the electric laws and all how to build, circuits and all that stuff. I do eventually want to do a whole panel just on how to make a computer. That's true. But in general, what would start a revolution in medicine? Well, wash your hands. What would start a revolution in industry itself? Well, an electric, how to make an electric generator, right? Things like that are very important. So if you have any ideas, send them out, and I'll look into them. I still have, a list of seeds I haven't even created yet that I'm wanting to get around to. I do have a day job. I have a lot of things I'm trying to get. I'd love to focus more on this. So help me out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share this, and let's get it done.